So this is a very quick presentation on my idea of panpsychism and the place of freedom in nature. Of course, that's a much broader topic, and now I can only touch a few intuitions here. And it's also, the backdrop of it is to a certain extent Whiteheadian metaphysics. And of course, those entail both indeterminism and panpsychism. And libertarianism at least requires indeterminism. But why panpsychism? Why would panpsychism do us any good when we want to discuss the possibility of freedom in nature? So a naturalized theory of freedom. The idea is that without mental representation of possibilities, there's no choice in the sense of this two-stage model of libertarian freedom. As most of you know, probably all of you know, there are two kinds of panpsychism. There's constitutive panpsychism, and there is non-constitutive panpsychism. Constitutive panpsychism claims that macro experience is constituted by and grounded in or realized by micro experience. It is in many ways the most attractive form of panpsychism because it claims there is an a priori entailment from microphenomenal truth to macrophenomenal truth. So there's no need of emergence. The bottom level determines everything. And one of the key arguments or incentive or motivations for espousing panpsychism in the first place is to avoid emergence as much as possible. The other version of panpsychism, and that's the one I have been arguing for a number of years, is non-constitutive panpsychism. The special composition question, as we call it in analytic philosophy, so the emergence of higher level individuals, is solved by assuming the strong emergence of higher level mental unities if the structural conditions are met at the lower level. This kind of emergence does not mean, however, that the mental can emerge from the non-mental. So this motivation for panpsychism is still valid. The mental does not emerge from the non-mental. It's only that higher level unities of entities that have mental properties, or higher level entities that have mental properties, can emerge from lower level entities or configurations of lower level entities that have mental properties. But never ever can the mental emerge from the utterly and entirely non-mental. So the higher level psychophysical individuals with new causal powers can emerge from lower level psychophysical individuals. That's strong emergence, but not radical emergence or super strong emergence, as I sometimes have called it, which would be the emergence from the mental from the utterly non-mental. And I think Whitehead is a clear case of this view of non-constitutive panpsychism. This might be up for debate, but that's the way it seems to me. And then I have argued for a causal model of emergence as opposed to the fusion model. So all of these models are non-supervenience-based models of emergence. Otherwise, we would fall into the Kim trap, so to speak of causal explanatory exclusion. In the line of the O'Connor and Wong model, I have argued that if emergent entities are metaphysically primitive, rather than mere constitutive resultants of lower level features, then the correct relation between the lower and higher level is causal and not supervenient. And if these causal connections are indeterministic, then we can escape the iron grip of microdeterminism. Or as Whitehead would put it, the many become one and are increased by one. But so many lower level individuals become one and a new individual emerges. So fixing the microphysical state of the universe will not suffice to fix the distribution of emergent properties, even if we take emergence laws into account. If these laws are indeterministic, then a given microphysical state may have more than one emergent outcome. Additional temporal dynamics to this picture yields a causal process-oriented metaphysics instead of a formal and static view. And I would say that the process and reality would be a prime example of such a dynamic view of causal emergence. If the underlying levels of nature reach a certain threshold of complexity or configuration, then an emergent individual is likely to appear. The causal properties of the emergent entity will go beyond the summation of the causal powers at the underlying level. As, for example, now advocated for in IIT, integrated information theory by Tononi, there this is exactly the case. The higher level mental unities with maximum phi have causal powers that go beyond the summation of the causal powers at the underlying micro level. There will be a genuinely new entity with new causal powers. And this, of course, raises Kim's exclusion problem. The diachronic causal activities of an emergent entity seem to be metaphysically superfluous. They add no causal efficacy over and above that of the causal mechanism at the base level. But this entire contention is based on the supervenience model, the asymmetric dependence built into the concept of supervenience, and the causal problems circumvents this argument. So the O'Connor-Wang model of emergence is not susceptible to this kind of counter-argument. Now, what is causality? Of course, that's another mega topic. But I would argue that a robust metaphysical notion of freedom needs a robust metaphysical notion of causation. And here I will look, I'm inspired very much by Greg Rosenberg's work, that causation as we want to have it here, when we want to allow for some kind of mental causation, which is the metaphysical foundation of the possibility of freedom. If you want to allow for some kind of mental causation, the model of causation as power to bring about is not the best possible option, because it seems to be inherently mechanistic. It is somehow tied to the billiard ball model. Mental causation is not mechanistic, however, also argued in the Whiteheadian spirit. And it comes in handy then that modern physics does not need causality as bringing about. So the evolution of a field, for example, is simply represented by a dynamical equation. And it was already Russell who said that causality as bringing about is as superfluous in this model as the Queen is for the British society. It's nice to have, but doesn't have much of a causal impact. That's his example, not mine. I'm not espousing any political views here, but it's just a Russell quote. So with Greg Rosenberg, I take as the paradigm case for causality two quantum entangled particles. Two entangled particles are similar to two coins that must always be flipped together and that share a special constraint. Say if one comes up heads, the other one must come up tails. It could not come both up tails or both heads. In this sense, the state of each has causal significance for the other, but not bringing about the state of the other. Their mutual causal significance excludes possibilities, the two I just described. So causal significance names the presence of constraint between them, while not necessarily explaining the state of one by assigning responsibility or temporal precedence to the other. Such a theory of causal significance will have a radically different form than we would expect from a theory of causal responsibility. Theories of causal responsibility invite us not to focus on constraint, but on causal powers, capable of bringing other things about, that is, on causes producing effects. Therefore, theorists of causal responsibility tend to produce theories of causal production. And to illustrate this very nicely with big metaphysical questions, the Ur question, so to speak, of metaphysics, in a deep sense, then the theory of causal responsibility starts from the perplexity that changes occur. Why did something happen? And the driving metaphysical question is the ancient one. Why is there something rather than nothing? In this different view, which I think is much better suited to understand the existence of mental causation in nature, is, in contrast, causal significance. The core concept behind it is not production, because production requires one thing in some sense come out of another. Production is an asymmetric, directed, and naturally limited to local connection. If the deep structure of the natural world is a structure of natural constraint, then the logic of constraint leads to focus on selective inclusion and exclusion rather than production. Or you could put it this way: in a deep sense, the search for a theory of causal significance suggests that the grand metaphysical question all along should have been, why is there something rather than everything? Instead of why is there something rather than nothing? Why doesn't every arbitrary combination of properties occur? And this is, so to speak, the key intuition of a theory of causality, which is a theory of causal significance. This theory of causal significance, the theory underlying the magic of the canvas of causation, will be a theory of symmetric and asymmetric state constraints between individuals. It is a theory designed to understand how constraints propagate. So it explains how the actual world comes to be just a sliver of what could have been. One way to frame the alternative to causal production through reference to the determination problem. The determination problem arises from the fact that the world's individuals have many potential states. To be actualized, an individual must take on one of those, and only one of the potential states. Thus, it must become determinate. So if the world is indeterminate at the lowest level, which for the time being I assume, then the problem of determination arises. How out of this indeterminacy determinate states arise? One can imagine the world's basic properties, say mass, charge, velocity, and so on, as mere potentials with many possible determinate values. So the determination problem is then to create a determinate world from these indeterminate potentials. And that's exactly what causation solves. Causation is solving the determination problem, that out of those many possibilities, mere possibilities, one is selected. And this I want to take as the metaphysical model of causation, and you can immediately see this is exactly the model also for mental causation, because in mental causation, we represent many possibilities and select one. So I want to get mental causation and physical causation in closer alignment. And then if I have a panpsychist picture, then there's only a gradual difference between mental causation, so to speak, in lower level animals or even below, and humans. And so freedom has been naturalized. That's the general thrust, the argument. So there must, of course, be indeterminacy in the lower level for a higher level to emerge at all. Without indeterminacy in the lower level, the determination problem is solved, and there's no need for further causation, and there is also no emergence anymore in the causal model of emergence. So the causal model of emergence implies that the emergence laws are indeterministic, so the lowest level must be indeterministic. There must still be a determination problem. If the lowest level has already solved the determination problem, then there is no causality to do. There's no need for causality. Any adequate view of causation must commit to a version of abstract modal realism, because causation has no work to do unless there exist real alternatives to actuality. If there were not any real alternatives to actuality, the existence of causal constraints would be illusory. I took as a picture out of Rosenberg's book, from which I got the general idea of causal significance many, many years ago, and then elaborated on it. At the lowest level of nature, you are still here for this given system, 5 possible states. And the more you move up into the higher levels of that system, the number of possible states become fewer, it becomes more determinate. And at level 5, it reaches determinacy. That's basically this hierarchical model of reaching determinacy is the underlying metaphysical model. And of course, it's the higher level, the higher levels have something to do in selecting the possibilities. This is, if you have read the book, it's sometimes mathematical and the formalism a bit strange, but if you have read the book by Epperson on Whitehead and quantum mechanics, I think that's a perfect illustration of what I just wanted to say here. For him, the quantum mechanical evolution of the state of a system is characterized as the valuation of potential novel facts and potential novel historical facts as the evolution proceeds relative to the historical route of actualities constitutive of itself and the universe. So the valuations of potential states of this quantum mechanical evolution are describable as a matrix of probabilities such that they are mutually exclusive and exhaustive. And only one, in the process of determination, one can be chosen and then the others are excluded. And that's the process of becoming, so to speak, that out of a potential arrangement of potential novel facts, one is elected. It is not produced, so to speak, by the causal powers of the past. It's selected out of the realm of possibilities. And this is not your, I would argue, selecting out of possibilities so that if one is selected, all the others immediately are via constraint excluded. The model for this is not the mechanical billiard ball, but the model for this is quantum entanglement. If 2 particles are entangled and one is observed, then immediately the state spin up, spin down of the other one, even faster than light, immediately the other state is determined. This, I think, is the much better model for causality. So if panpsychism is true, then natural individuals have mental properties. There is a mental physical distinction in every natural individual. That's the idea. That's why we heard yesterday that panpsychism is probably not, by Thomas, the best word, because it sounds like everything is just mental. No, everything has at least a mental intrinsic properties, or but is not only mental. It doesn't mean everything is mental in the sense that everything is merely mental. Minds may not be able to bring about something in the sense of production in the physical world, but they can be involved in choosing one actualized mere possibility. So selecting, bringing to collapse the superposition of possibility. So as like Wigner, and currently in his most recent paper, which just came out about a week ago by David Chalmers, where he argues that the mind actually collapses the wave function. So inasmuch as they can settle the question which physical activity they will perform, the minds then exercise a kind of freedom by selection out of these possibilities. So the indeterminism is not between choice and action, so as having no control over one's actions after the choice. The indeterminism is in the process of evaluating the possibilities and making a choice happen. It is the action itself, in the sense of Helen Stewart, that settles the possibilities, in the sense of Helen Stewart's Metaphysics of Freedom. Or in old quote here by Marginot. Our thesis is that quantum mechanics leaves our body, our brain, at any moment in a state with numerous possible futures, each with a predetermined probability. Freedom involves two components or two stages: chance, the existence of a genuine set of alternatives, and choice. And quantum mechanics provides the chance, and we shall argue that only the mind can make the choice by selecting, not energetically enforcing, among the possible future courses. So that's what Marginot argued in 1982, and what I'm suggesting is something in that tradition. So final slide. Here's a recent paper, Institute for Biology of the Free University in Berlin, where I got my doctorate. And they're looking at precursors, so to speak, of free will in invertebrate animals, leeches of all animals. And they argue that essentially the existence of neural circuits implementing a two-stage model of free will would mean that you can know everything about an organism's genes and environment, yet still be unable to anticipate its caprices. Importantly, this inability is not due to inevitable stochasticity beyond control. It is due to dedicated brain processes that have evolved to generate unpredictable, spontaneous actions in the face of pursuit, evasion, contest, competition, and problem solving. So what the biologists here observe, yet under these carefully controlled experimental circumstances, the animal behaves as it damn well pleases. What the scientists have observed is the external evidence for the kind of possibility collapsing that mind-endowed entities are possible, which I would argue in this very, very brief presentation is the basis, the metaphysical and physical basis for, or rather the metaphysical basis for the existence of freedom in nature. Thank you very much.